Hello, Army. Welcome back to K-pop News Channel. Something happened to Taehyung in Toronto that Army couldn't ignore, and for a moment, it looked like he simply couldn't hold his emotions back anymore. But what happened before that breakdown may be even more shocking. Jungkook noticed something was wrong, and his reaction instantly caught everyone's attention. He didn't just watch from a distance. He moved toward Taehyung. Then, after everything unfolded, both Jungkook and Taehyung seemed to address what had really been happening beneath the surface. Taehyung's response was especially emotional because it hinted at something he had been carrying for much longer than anyone realized. So, what actually pushed Taehyung to that breaking point in Toronto? And why did Jungkook react the way he did? Stay until the end because the moment Taehyung finally responded may change the way you see that entire night. The moment Kim Taehyung appeared on stage in Toronto, something felt different. To the thousands of fans watching, he was still smiling, still performing, still giving everything he had to the crowd. But if you looked closely, there were moments when that smile seemed to disappear almost instantly. There was a tension in his expression that was difficult to explain. Kim Taehyung seemed to be fighting something internally while trying to keep the performance going, and that was what made the situation even more emotional. He wasn't simply standing in front of thousands of people. He was trying to remain composed while everyone was watching. Then came the moment that changed the atmosphere. Kim Taehyung appeared overwhelmed by his emotions, and fans immediately began wondering what had happened behind the scenes. Was it the pressure of the concert? Was it exhaustion? Was there something personal that had been weighing on him? No one could know for certain just by watching the footage. But one person seemed to notice the change almost immediately: Jungkook. While everyone else was focused on the performance, Jungkook appeared to pay attention to Kim Taehyung in a different way. His eyes seemed to follow him, and his reaction became one of the most discussed moments among fans. Then Jungkook moved closer. That small movement created a completely different conversation. Some fans believed Jungkook simply wanted to make sure Kim Taehyung was okay. Others interpreted the moment as something much deeper, especially because of the timing and the emotional state Kim Taehyung appeared to be in. But there was one problem. Nobody actually knew what was happening between them. And that uncertainty made the moment even more intense. For Kim Taehyung, however, the emotional reaction seemed to be about more than one isolated moment. His expression suggested that something had been building for a while. The pressure, the expectations, the constant attention, and the responsibility of standing in front of thousands of people can become overwhelming, even for someone who appears confident on stage. And perhaps that is what made his later response so important. Instead of simply allowing the moment to disappear, Kim Taehyung appeared to acknowledge the emotions surrounding what had happened. His response gave fans another reason to look back at the entire Toronto performance and question what they had missed. Was Kim Taehyung trying to tell everyone that there was more going on beneath the surface? Or were fans connecting pieces that were never meant to be connected? That is where the story becomes controversial, because the internet quickly turned one emotional moment into countless theories. Some people believe Jungkook knew exactly what Kim Taehyung was going through. Others argued that fans were reading too much into a simple gesture between two members who have supported each other for years. Neither interpretation could be confirmed simply from the footage. But one thing was impossible to deny. Jungkook reacted and Kim Taehyung noticed. The atmosphere between them became one of the moments that fans continued discussing long after the concert ended. Every glance, every movement, and every reaction suddenly seemed more significant. Yet, the biggest question remained unanswered. What had actually pushed Kim Taehyung to that emotional breaking point? The answer may not have been as simple as one moment on stage. There could have been exhaustion behind it. There could have been overwhelming emotions from the concert itself. There could have been personal feelings that fans knew nothing about. Or perhaps Kim Taehyung was simply experiencing a rare moment when the pressure became too much to hide. And this is exactly why his response matters. Because when Kim Taehyung finally appeared to address what he had been feeling, fans didn't just hear another explanation. They saw another side of him. A side that had been hidden behind performances, smiles, jokes, and professionalism. For someone who constantly gives energy to millions of people, there are moments when even the strongest person can reach their limit. And on that Toronto night, Kim Taehyung seemed to show exactly that. But then there was Jungkook. His decision to move toward Kim Taehyung became the detail that made the entire moment even more emotional. Was it simply instinct? Was Jungkook concerned because he realized Kim Taehyung was struggling? Or did he understand something about Kim Taehyung that the audience could never see? That question is still what makes the moment so compelling. Because sometimes, the most powerful part of a story isn't what someone says. It's what they do when they think nobody is watching. And in Toronto, Jungkook's reaction happened at precisely the moment Kim Taehyung seemed to need someone beside him. But there is still one final detail that makes the story even more difficult to ignore. Kim Taehyung didn't simply remain silent afterward. He responded. And what he seemed to reveal about everything he had been carrying is the part that makes fans look at that Toronto moment completely differently. Because maybe the breakdown wasn't really the beginning of the story. Maybe it was the moment when everything Kim Taehyung had been holding inside finally became impossible to hide. What happened next made the Toronto moment even harder to forget. For a while, Kim Taehyung seemed to return to the performance as if nothing had happened. He continued doing what he had always done, smiling for the audience, focusing on the stage, and trying to give ARMY the performance they had been waiting for. But once emotions have been exposed, it becomes difficult to pretend they never existed. Fans began looking back at everything that happened before the breakdown. Small details that seemed insignificant at first suddenly felt different. A change in Kim Taehyung's expression, a quiet moment between performances, the way he appeared to collect himself before continuing. And then there was Jungkook. His reaction became impossible for fans to ignore. Jungkook didn't need to make a dramatic announcement. He didn't need to explain himself in front of thousands of people. His actions were enough to make everyone wonder whether he had recognized something that others had missed. That was when the questions became even bigger. Had Jungkook already noticed that Kim Taehyung was struggling before the audience did? Had Kim Taehyung been trying to hide his emotions for the entire performance? Or was the moment simply an emotional reaction to everything happening around him? Nobody outside the two of them could truly know. And that uncertainty is exactly what made the Toronto footage so powerful. Because fans weren't just watching a performance anymore. They were watching two people react to an unexpectedly emotional situation in real time. The most interesting part was that Kim Taehyung did not appear to want attention for his emotions. If anything, he seemed to be trying to regain control and continue. That detail changed the way many people interpreted the moment. Instead of seeing the breakdown as something dramatic, some fans began seeing it as a rare glimpse of vulnerability from someone who is usually extremely composed in front of the public. Kim Taehyung has spent years performing under enormous expectations. Every expression can become a headline. Every interaction can be analyzed. Every unexpected reaction can become a topic of discussion. So, when someone like Kim Taehyung finally allows his emotions to show, even for a few seconds, it can feel much more significant. And perhaps that is why his response afterward mattered so much. Kim Taehyung seemed to acknowledge that there were emotions behind what fans had witnessed. He didn't need to reveal every private detail. He didn't need to explain everything happening inside his mind. Sometimes, simply acknowledging that something affected, you can say more than a long explanation. But then another question appeared. Why did Jungkook react so quickly? This is where opinions became divided. Some fans believed it was simply the natural reaction of one member noticing another member was emotional. Others saw the timing as something far more meaningful. The truth is that a short piece of footage cannot prove what someone was thinking or feeling, and it would be unfair to turn assumptions into facts. But that doesn't make the moment meaningless. If anything, it makes it more fascinating. Because whatever the exact reason was, Jungkook clearly appeared attentive to Kim Taehyung during one of the most emotional moments of the night. And Kim Taehyung's reaction afterward only added another layer to the story. For years, fans have watched these two members share countless moments on stage and behind the scenes. Some are playful, some are chaotic, some are incredibly subtle. But Toronto felt different. There was no obvious joke to distract from the emotion. There was no elaborate performance designed to create a memorable moment. There was simply Kim Taehyung appearing vulnerable and Jungkook reacting to him. That simplicity is what made people keep replaying it. And then came the part nobody expected. Kim Taehyung seemed to address the emotions surrounding the situation rather than completely ignoring them. That response caused another wave of discussion because it suggested that the moment had affected him enough to acknowledge it. But what exactly was he responding to? Was it the pressure of performing? Was it the exhaustion of a demanding schedule? Was it the overwhelming reaction from thousands of fans? Or was there something more personal that Kim Taehyung simply wasn't ready to explain publicly? This is where viewers have to separate what can actually be seen from what can only be imagined. The footage can show expressions. It can show movements. It can show reactions. But it cannot reveal someone's private thoughts. And perhaps Kim Taehyung wanted it that way. Maybe he wasn't trying to tell the world everything. Maybe he was simply allowing himself one honest moment. One moment where he didn't have to pretend that everything was perfect. And that possibility makes his reaction even more emotional. Because behind every performance is a person. Behind every smile is someone who can become tired. Behind every confident appearance is someone who can have difficult days. And Kim Taehyung's Toronto moment reminded many fans of that reality. But the story still doesn't end there. The reason Jungkook moved toward him remains one of the biggest details surrounding the entire incident. It may have been friendship. It may have been concern. It may have been instinct. It may have been nothing more complicated than one member checking on another. Only Jungkook and Kim Taehyung know what that moment truly meant to them. And perhaps that is why the moment continues to attract so much attention. Because viewers were given just enough to feel something happened, but not enough to know the entire story. And sometimes the unanswered questions become more powerful than the answers. What we do know is that Kim Taehyung appeared emotional. Jungkook noticed. Jungkook reacted. And Kim Taehyung later seemed to respond to the emotions surrounding the moment. Everything beyond that belongs to interpretation. But there is one thing that cannot be ignored. For a brief moment in Toronto, the superstar image disappeared. There was no perfect performance persona. There was no carefully controlled expression. There was simply Kim Taehyung being human. And perhaps Jungkook's reaction mattered because at that exact moment, Kim Taehyung didn't need another person watching him. He needed someone who noticed. And that is what makes the Toronto D1 moment so difficult to forget. But the more fans looked at the Toronto D1 moment, the more another possibility began to emerge. Maybe the most important part wasn't the moment Kim Taehyung broke down. Maybe it was everything that happened before it. For hours, Kim Taehyung had been surrounded by thousands of people. Cameras were everywhere. Every movement was being captured. Every expression could be turned into a discussion within minutes. Yet despite all of that attention, there was still a part of Kim Taehyung that nobody in the audience could see. What was happening inside his mind? That question became impossible to ignore. Because when someone suddenly becomes emotional in front of such a massive crowd, people naturally search for a reason. They want an explanation that connects every detail. And that's exactly where the Toronto story became complicated. There wasn't one confirmed explanation that could answer everything. Instead, there were fragments, a tired expression, a sudden change in emotion. Jungkook noticing. Jungkook moving closer. Kim Taehyung trying to regain his composure. And later, Kim Taehyung appearing to address the emotions surrounding the night. Individually, each detail might not mean much. Together, they created a moment that fans couldn't stop discussing. What made it even more interesting was how quickly the conversation moved beyond the stage. People started asking whether Kim Taehyung had been dealing with more emotional pressure than anyone realized. Not necessarily because something dramatic had happened. Sometimes pressure doesn't come from one event. Sometimes it builds slowly. One busy day becomes another. One performance becomes another. One expectation becomes another. And eventually, even someone who seems incredibly strong can reach a point where emotions become impossible to control. That doesn't mean we know exactly what Kim Taehyung was experiencing. It simply means the possibility cannot be dismissed. And this is where his response became important. Kim Taehyung appeared to give fans a glimpse into how he was feeling without turning the entire situation into a dramatic confession. There was something almost restrained about it, as if he wanted people to understand that the moment was real, but also wanted to keep certain parts of it private. That balance is difficult when millions of people are watching. Say too little, and people create their own explanations. Say too much, and suddenly something deeply personal becomes public property. Kim Taehyung seemed to choose the middle ground. And perhaps that was the most revealing part. Meanwhile, Jungkook's reaction continued to attract attention. Fans noticed how quickly he appeared to respond when Kim Taehyung became emotional. Some interpreted that as evidence of a particularly strong connection. Others saw it as nothing more than what any close teammate might do when they notice someone struggling. Both interpretations are possible. And that's why turning the moment into a definite claim about their private relationship would be unfair. But there is something else worth noticing. Jungkook didn't appear to make the situation about himself. His attention remained focused on what was happening in front of him. That subtlety made the moment feel more genuine to many viewers. There was no obvious attempt to create a dramatic scene. No announcement. No explanation. Just a reaction. And sometimes reactions reveal more about a person's instincts than carefully prepared words ever could. Still, Kim Taehyung's response remains the part that keeps the story alive. Because after fans had spent so much time trying to understand what happened, Kim Taehyung seemed to provide a small piece of the answer himself. Not necessarily the complete explanation, but enough to make people realize that the emotions they witnessed were not something they had simply imagined. The moment mattered to him. And that changed the conversation. Instead of asking whether Kim Taehyung was really emotional, fans began asking why the emotions had become so strong. Was he exhausted? Was he overwhelmed by the audience? Was the concert itself deeply emotional? Was there something personal involved? Or was it simply one of those rare moments when everything became too much at once? There may never be a complete public answer, and perhaps that's okay. Not every emotional moment needs to become a full explanation. Sometimes people are allowed to feel something without explaining every detail to the world. That may be one of the biggest lessons from Toronto. Kim Taehyung didn't owe everyone access to his private thoughts. Jungkook didn't owe everyone an explanation for his reaction. And fans didn't necessarily need to know every detail to understand that something emotionally significant had happened. But then another detail brought the story back to where it started. The way Jungkook reacted when Kim Taehyung appeared overwhelmed. That moment happened quickly. Yet, it became one of the most replayed parts of the night. Why? Because viewers could see the contrast. Kim Taehyung was trying to hold himself together. Jungkook appeared to notice, and suddenly the atmosphere changed. It was a reminder that even on the biggest stage, unexpected human moments can break through the performance. The audience came to watch a concert. Instead, they witnessed something far more vulnerable. And perhaps that is why the Toronto D1 moment continues to resonate. Not because it proves one particular theory. Not because it confirms every rumor circulating online, but because it showed Kim Taehyung in a moment where the polished image disappeared for a second. And when Jungkook responded, fans saw something equally human. Concern, attention, and instinct. The rest remains unknown. But maybe the unanswered part is exactly what keeps everyone watching. Because the more you look at that night, the more you realize that the real story may not be about one breakdown at all. It may be about everything Kim Taehyung had been carrying before that.